So this is week 4. This is our last Sunday for this series that we're calling I Am, and it's finding peace in an anxious world. And we're talking about a lot of different what ifs in the midst of this series, and kind of looking at what is a way that Jesus addresses these things. And today, we're going to be talking about what if I get hurt? That's a question that we're looking at. And in the midst of this series, we've been talking about fear. Fear of what if I don't have enough? Today we're looking at fear of what if I get hurt? And I wanted to just take a moment and kind of talk about fear a little bit deeper. Fear is something that likely all of us at some point we give way to. We let it lead us. Now, I doubt that any of us desire for that to be the case. None of us probably think, I would think at least consciously, that I want fear to be the thing that guides me. I want fear to be that thing that directs me, that informs my decision making, to be the thing that has authority in my life. Most of us probably don't think fear should have the last word. And I have to imagine that most, if not all of us, don't like to be crippled into submission by fear, so much so that we can't move, that we stand still, that we fear what's around the corner, we fear what's next, and so it's got to be better for me to do nothing than to do something, and so I'm going to choose to do nothing. Fear can lead us to that point. I think at times we can let it work this way. Fear, it can hold us back. It can push us into things also that we don't want to do. So it can hold us back, but it can also move us in a direction that maybe isn't actually the right direction. Sometimes fear, it screams at us, right? It is like, if you do this, this bad thing is going to happen. You better watch out. But other times, it's like a whisper. And I would argue that most of the time, it's like a whisper. As if there was somebody just behind our shoulder saying, this is a bad idea. You won't have enough. You're going to get hurt. You shouldn't do this. You can't do it. You're not good enough. They don't care about you. Why bother investing in them? What if you fail again? What if you get hurt again? We can give power and authority to fear, can't we? If fear whispers these little lies in our ears, our aim here this morning is to look at, well, what is a counter truth? These truths, they come from Jesus, from God's word, and the working of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And for today, we're looking at the question fear asks us, what if I get hurt? And to be honest, this seems like an innocent question, doesn't it? It almost seems like wisdom, right? This is just a crazy example. I recognize this. Okay, but say you're in an airplane, and you're at like this open bay door, and you're 5,000 feet above the ground, and you don't have a parachute on you, and the person next to you is saying, okay, it's your turn to jump. Is it fear that is keeping you from jumping, or is it wisdom? Which one is it? Probably both, but mostly wisdom, right? Right, yeah. And so that's where wisdom can kind of come in. But sometimes fear is masked as wisdom. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be asking the right questions and listening for the right voices. There might be a little fear, but wisdom, again, is telling us don't jump out of this plane. Context is really important in the midst of this, is what I'm getting at. What we're talking about here this morning is a little bit more in terms of relational or emotional hurt. That's what we're more looking at. Physical too, yes, there can be that for sure. but primarily it's these other ways. And fear, what it does is it will whisper these questions to us. What if I get hurt again? These what ifs. What if they don't like me or they make fun of me? What if I get rejected? What if I lose this person that I care about? What if I can't ever get over the passing of this other person? We lose somebody. Sometimes the fear of an unknown situation, it creeps up and it causes us not to try something new. But a lot of times, these questions that we ask here, these are, trauma. Quite possibly there could be trauma that we're not wanting to relive. There's these questions from past experiences. Maybe in the past we've been rejected. We know what it's like to grieve in the midst of losing someone that we love. We know what it's like to be looked over for a promotion, to have abuse in our life. And abuse can look in a lot of different ways. Broken relationships, trauma that has built up over the years from intense moments. Fear can cause us to freeze, where our feet, we feel like we cannot even move. And more so, fear can be disguised as something that it isn't. In this case, fear disguises itself as protection. If I don't do these things, then I'm okay. I'm protected. I'm good. I'll be safe. We're looking at Jesus' I am statements as a way to understand this counter-truth, where these lies that come up from fear cause us to stand still. What we want to do today is we're going to look at John chapter 10. These I am statements, they go through the book of John. Here we're going to be in John 10. And this is when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I'm the good shepherd. Now, in an effort to give a slight glimpse of some cultural context for kind of when Jesus is talking to his disciples and to the people that are around him and listening, and he's talking about a shepherd, and he's using a lot of this imagery here. It's really good for us to have a bit of a better picture of what they would have known about shepherds and sheep and flocks and pens and all this sort of stuff. And so here's a few things for us to remember. Now, in towns and villages, then, sheep from different flocks would often be kept in the same pen together when they weren't out grazing. That was a common thing. Now, these pens, they would be completely surrounded by a fence, the whole perimeter, except for one space where there would be an opening. Now, there wouldn't be a physical gate there. Oftentimes, most of the time, it was just an opening. But this is where the shepherd would stay, so that anyone who wanted to go into the pen would have to go through him, or like right by him, so that they would be able to go in and out, and obviously the sheep as well. And the shepherd would often sleep there in this gate, so the sheep would actually have to jump over him to get out. And they wouldn't do that because sheep just don't jump over their shepherd. That's just not what they do. And so, if there was somebody else who wanted to get in, they had to go through this gate. And if they didn't go through the gate, then they had malintent, right? They were thieves or robbers. They were trying to take the sheep out of there. When it was time to go out of the pen, remember there's multiple flocks here. The shepherd would call out to his sheep, and they knew his voice or her voice, and they would follow their shepherd out, and the other sheep would just stay there because they didn't know this voice. This is kind of how things would go. Again, remember, there could be multiple flocks there in this one pen. And this is the way it was. Things to keep in mind as we listen to these words from Jesus here in John chapter 10. So let's look at this. This is John 10, 1 through 18. I'm going to read the whole thing, so buckle in. It's not really that long. Jesus had just healed a blind person, and the Pharisees were there, and they were making a big deal out of this because of the timing. So he's still continuing this conversation. He says, "Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listens to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep will follow him because they know his voice, things that we've just been talking about. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep, and all who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Now, I recognize one thing right out of the bat. He hasn't gotten to talking about the shepherd. He's just talking about the gate. This is a different I am statement. Yes, you're right if you're already thinking through this. But he was talking about the good shepherd. I'm reading all this because this gives great context for what's next. Verse 11. Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and he runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. He just wants to get paid and be fed." Verse 14, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, not only to take it up again." Or, let me read. Let's just go back. "The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down out of my own accord." This should ring bells for us when we think about the crucifixion, where Jesus did not fight. It says, "I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again," talking about the resurrection. "This command I received from my Father." There's a whole lot in here, little nuances, big nuances, things that could really stand out to us. So I recognize that, and just know, heads up, you might be disappointed. We're not going to talk about all of it because we just don't have time for this today. Just want to give you a heads up on that. But one big thing here is that Jesus describes himself as the shepherd. But he's not just a shepherd, he is the good shepherd. Some things that he says. A good shepherd, one, it takes care of the ones he loves, knows each of his own by name. He protects those in his flock, nurtures the hurt one, guides, directs, leads out in front. Now here's something about the sheep. The sheep know the shepherd's voice. They recognize the voice, and they feel comforted by that voice. They trust him because he hasn't let them down. When danger came, danger was present. When there were reasons to be fearful, the shepherd didn't run. The shepherd fought for the sheep. Because of that, they trust him. They believe that he has their good in mind because he has laid down his life for them. They trust him. They believe in him. When, not if, but when the sheep wander, the shepherd goes after them. Very intentionally say when. Not if the sheep wander, but when they do, he goes after them. Jumping back into today. We live in a challenging world. At every turn, in just about every moment, there is someone or something trying to influence the direction that you and I take. There is someone or something trying to show you what you don't have so that you feel a sense of lack. That's what Wendy talked about last week. There is someone or something that is whispering, if you only had this, you would be protected in this world. There's a lot of things you can fill in that blank of whatever this is. What fear does is it can creep in and start to shape us. It can start to mold us. This is a literal question. Is fear supposed to shape us? No. Is fear supposed to mold us? Yes or no? No. Now, in our culture today, the term sheep is not one that usually people use to describe people in a good way. Is it? No, it's not. Like, if you were in a conversation with somebody and they were like, oh, you're just a sheep. They don't mean like, man, you're really following Jesus well. Good job. That's not what they're saying. They just mean you follow blindly and you don't even have a mind of your own. It is an insult. That is the way that they mean this. It usually means that you are a follower and you are not a leader. You were easily led by anyone with a loud voice or who was holding something flashy and pretty. That you are following the crowd instead of trying to stand out. And you are being led to slaughter. That's what they mean. So you can see, this is one, I think if Jesus were here in this moment, standing here and speaking to you, and I think he would still like to use this imagery. Because he would want to fight against this thing of you're mindless. You don't know what to do or who to follow. You can't stand out, and so you're just a follower. You're just a sheep. When we have a shepherd like Jesus, and the subsequent protection that comes from being in his care, it is okay to be a sheep. It is okay to be one that follows. You could be a leader in your job. You could be a leader in your community, in your home. You can have good influence for the sake of the kingdom. But every one of us is still a follower. Every one of us is still called to be and invited to be a follower of Jesus. Last week, Psalm 23? Yeah. Last week, Wendy was reading through Psalm 23 and emphasized how we lack nothing. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I lack nothing because of the Lord's provision. In kind, fear of danger or hurt, it needs to not have influence over us, because we may have moments where we're led into a dark valley. Remember, there's this moment in Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I still remember it in the King James too. Like, that's the way I was taught back in the day. Yea, though I walk. It does. It just rolls right off the tongue. Even though I don't use that word yay. So, but when we are led into this dark valley, where we are led into a dangerous place or into dangerous moments, and not just physical danger in the sense of like there are darts being flung at me or ninja stars or I'm walking through the jungle and lions are crouching behind me, like actual lions. Most of us, that's not our experience. But we have these like emotional daggers, these relational daggers that sometimes get flung at us. But we can remember that we are well protected and taken care of by a good shepherd. There's something that is, I would say, critical, super important, really good for all of us to take note of. Are you catching my drift here? In the midst of this, is that we must recognize Jesus' voice. That's why the sheep feel comforted. They have known his voice since they were young. One of the things that was really important back then about a shepherd is that a shepherd, it was really good for that shepherd to have like an apprentice, because if that shepherd died for whatever, just aged out, old, whatever, died, or they retired. I don't know if shepherds retired, but if that shepherd died, the sheep would not know what to do because they would not have a voice to recognize, to follow. It was just part of what was in them. For us, thankfully, Jesus isn't going anywhere. He is present with us. He is present with you, with me, with all of us. And his voice isn't what gives us protection. It's his presence that gives us protection. Recognizing Jesus' voice is what helps guide us and have confidence in the steps that we need to take in order to be able to walk with the Good Shepherd. There's a lot of, we talked about the what ifs, right? I could get into all of the what ifs, if you step into this situation, here's a good way for us to seek Jesus. If we find ourselves in this situation, here's how we can know that Jesus is present. That list is real long, very long. Your past hurts and experiences and trauma and pain and frustrations that you have had it's a big list, all of us in our community. So I'm not going to go into that lane or those multiple lanes, but what I want to do is take a moment to say, and what I've tried to do here is to say, let's take a look at what fear is and what it does, which we've done that. And say, let's take a look at John 10 and see how Jesus describes himself. What is this counter truth to fear of being hurt? We walk through a dangerous place. We have moments of real hurt, of real anguish, of real sadness and pain, which can cause us to be still. Jesus talks about what it means for us to follow him. So we touched on that. We've done that. Now there's some questions that I want to ask us to consider and reflect on, and they're not going to be up here. My apologies. But things for us to be considering. First one is this: what influence do we let fear have in our lives on a regular basis? Influencers is Barry's laughing. It's just a weird thing, right? To me, that is an odd job to have, right? To be an influencer. Okay, that's like your title. But it's a thing. It's real. And, I think now what we've really done is we've just put a name to it. In the past, you would have commercials that were like, if you want to be a cool kid, you should wear these shoes. Reebok pumps, that's what it was when I was a kid. Yeah, y'all remember? Some of y'all? Yeah, nowadays, I don't know what it is for the kids, but there are different things to say, if you want to fit in, if you want the people around you to care about you, to like you, you got to have this thing. That was people having influence on our lives. Now we've just gotten so bold that it's a job title. So anyway, sorry, I got to step off that soapbox here for a second, probably for a long time. But what influence does fear have in our lives? How does it affect us? What are we letting it do to us? Do we, and this is important. You could call this the tale of two voices, really. Do we recognize when it is fear that is speaking in our ear? Do we recognize that? Here's another question. Do we trust, we're shifting gears here, do we trust Jesus as the Good Shepherd? Trust in Jesus is built over time. I recognize that. Trust in anyone is built over time. If you were here and you were new to this, and you struggle to say, yes, I trust Jesus with my life, with my heart, it's okay. Give it some time. do we, and this is kind of the last big question, is the tale of two voices, do we recognize Jesus' voice enough to follow him and not stay put? Do we recognize Jesus enough to follow him and not stay put? Thinking back to sheep. If a sheep never moves, it might luck out for a little while, right? If there's something for it to eat kind of in its general sort of like area where it is, it might be okay for a little while. If there's like a little like mud puddle for it to drink out of for a little while, it might be okay. There might be some water. Maybe there's some shade there nearby. But eventually that food might run out. That puddle might dry up. A predator may come. Eventually these things, they could run out. So I'm not telling you to move from Blacksburg, by the way. Just think that, or Christiansburg or New River Valley, wherever it is that you live. Eventually these things may run out, but it is the shepherd who knows when it is time to move. It is the shepherd who knows when it is time to go to the next place. Not only so that we're going to where things are fresh for us, that where we have our provision, where we have the things that we need, but also to know that we are in a dangerous place and we need to get out of this place. When you walk through a valley, you're walking through the valley. He doesn't say, hey, when you moved me into this valley so that I could live here forever. No, that's not what the shepherd was doing. The shepherd was moving us through the valley to get to the place that we were meant to go. We have this great protection from the Good Shepherd. And he knows when it is good for us to move and when it is good for us to stay put for a little bit. But we never stay put forever. We have to continue to walk with him. Anybody who's here, who's been walking with the Lord for a while. I've been walking with Jesus since I was 16 years old. I'm 43. I don't do math. Scott, what is that? 43 minus 16? Yeah, you're a math teacher. It's a lot. It's a while. And that's maybe close to half of what some of you are here have walked with Jesus for. Maybe that's double what some of you are here for. And that really doesn't matter so much. But you can have seasons where things feel dry. You can have seasons where you don't really feel like walking. But it is good to follow the shepherd's voice. It is good to listen and to be led. And it's okay to be a sheep in those moments. Are we listening? Are we trusting? Are we following? Good things for us to think about. Let's pray. Jesus, you are the good shepherd. It is good to know you. It is good to walk with you. It is good to be led by you. Our fears of being hurt they can come from a place of experience that says, well, I did this in the past and it didn't work out. I didn't like it. I got hurt. I don't want to feel that again, and so I don't do anything. But Jesus, you are good, and we can trust you, and we can follow you. And I recognize that I left some big holes on how to do that well here this morning. But what we want to do is to have kind of the ears of our heart, I know it's like a weird phrase, but like the ears of our heart open enough to hear from you. That we would be able to, and this is hard, but to be able to block out the whispers that fear wants to put into our mind and our hearts. And to be able to listen to you and to follow you, to hear your voice and recognize what is you, who is you, like who is that is speaking to us, what is you and what is not you. Jesus, I'm thankful for the grace that you give us. Because we're not going to do this perfectly. We're not always going to do this well. Sometimes we think we're going to hear from you, but really it's our pride or it's something else just blocking our way from truly hearing what it is that you have in store for us and how it is that we can walk well with you. So today, we want to submit ourselves to you. We want to ask that you would continue to guide. Would you continue to speak? Would you continue to protect us and shepherd us well? We love you. We pray all this in your name. Amen.